Welcome, and thank you for coming to this webinar about the case for digital manufacturing. We've got some exciting thought leaders here who are going to share some insights and discussions around the technology trends that are enabling smart manufacturing. Some quick statistics from a recent Deloitte publication, things that some of you guys probably are feeling a bit of. AI adopters believe that AI is key to market leadership in the future, obviously, but today as well. In fact, 56% of AI early adopters agree that their organization is slowing its adoption of AI technologies because of emerging risks. And while I don't personally fully understand why they might be slowing it, this shows that these AI early adopters have started that big initial push to implement and adopt AI in their organizations. And we'll probably hear today about some of the challenges around that could be being reflected in this sort of half of the early adopters feeling as though their organization is slowing its adoption for probably a few reasons. But of most of the AI early adopters, 73% believe that AI is very critically important to their business today. And I think amidst some of the COVID-19 global pandemic concerns, I think we can all feel that how advanced insights with our data and AI in general could really make a difference in our businesses, particularly right now. I think we're starting to see the importance of that in the future, and these are topics we'll talk about. 64% said that AI technologies enable them to establish a lead over their competitors, and 74% that agree that in 3 years, AI will be integrated into most all of their enterprise applications, which is very exciting. And I think we'll be hearing a lot about that path forward on AI and how to integrate that into a lot of manufacturing sectors today. So a quick introduction of the panel here. I'm Sydney Recton. I'm a data scientist at Solenis. I have a background in pulp and paper and chemical engineering from NC State and a master's degree in analytics from Georgia Tech. I'm responsible for helping support some key analytical product developments, which include Solenis's Optics Applied Intelligence platform, which is an AI platform to support manufacturing, mostly in the pulp and paper market. We have Kareem Porak, who is the co-founder and CEO of Process Miner. He has also co-founded several other startups in the biotech and AI fields. He's currently the CEO of Process Miner, which is an AI platform for manufacturing that applies advanced data science, machine learning, and automation to drive improvements in things like product quality as well as process optimization. From Litmus, we have John Eunice, a co-founder and COO of Litmus. He's in charge of operations and growth for the company and draws on his considerable startup experience working with early stage companies. He has a bachelor's degree in management from the University of Western Ontario and a master's degree in management with a specialization in global entrepreneurship. And then we've got Tony Lewis, who is the global product manager of digital services at Solenis. He manages programs ranging from advanced analytics platforms to IoT and other various digital initiatives within Solenis. Prior to Solenis, he held many manufacturing positions within pulp and paper, is quite well-rounded, holding positions from process and project engineering through production and plant operations. So without further ado, I think we'll get started here. So to kick things off, I'm just going to open up a question to everyone. What trends are you guys seeing relative to technology investments from the manufacturing sector? And based on your experiences, in fact, maybe Tony, you can start this one off. Are companies beginning to see a positive ROI on these investments, or is it too early?
Yeah, so I think the first part from what we're seeing is it's pretty varied, right? So you've got, just like on the first slide, there's some early adopters that are jumping in. and their levels of engagement and their investment are kind of staggered, right? Which kind of leads to the second piece around who's potentially seeing ROI from that. I think some have made heavily investments and then are still trying to figure things out. Others are seeing investments, and I think the ones that are seeing returns tend to be more focused versus just spreading themselves too thin. So I think focus is a big topic that I think we'll talk about, but it's pretty diverse right now from what we're seeing, from my experience. And like I said, it's just, you know, kind of a little too early, but I think people that are focusing are driving some results.
Right.
Anyone else want to add something?
Yeah. So Sydney, also the market challenges are driving the areas of investment by different companies and advanced technologies. To name a few, market volatility, right? Material costs, price reduction, labor costs, supply chain, environmental regulations and laws, and variety of different areas that the traditional automation has capped its capabilities. So companies now sort of investing toward advanced technologies such as AI or other technologies, robotics, industrial IoT, and advanced sensors in other areas to help them reduce the cost of operations, as well as have a sort of a lean manufacturing, a lean process across the board in their operations.
Yeah, so I can just add a little.
There. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I can add just a couple points as well. So what we're definitely seeing as well within the manufacturing sector is a big convergence within the OT to IT side of things. So really trying to bridge both of those gaps, because obviously with cloud becoming a big trend right now within the manufacturing sector, as a lot of companies start making heavy investments within cloud, they're looking at now how they can bridge that closer into the factory. So solving more challenges that respective to the cloud, but really how it bridges both that edge to cloud strategy as well as a whole.
Yeah, and I think the comfort on a security of their data also it's something that in the past few years has allowed them to move forward on sort of implementing and utilizing system on the edge side, on-prem side, or even fully on the cloud side as well.
So I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing that companies in the manufacturing sector are investing in advanced analytics products. They're investing in their IoT. They're investing in their data security. So although they might be investing in something specific based on what their needs are, as Tony kind of alluded to, it feels like there's a broad range of investments. But I still am getting a good sense that in manufacturing, a broad cross-section of manufacturers are still reluctant to invest in and adopt these newer technologies that will actually help their operations achieve a digital transformation and be successful in Industry 4.0. Kareem, what advice do you have for those manufacturers who are just on the brink? They've yet to actually make these investments.
Of course. So we all know that the importance of the technology advancements to future business performance is evident, is very clear. Digital transformations require a broad digital strategy, very detailed, to understand the manufacturer's market challenges in a new way. To get out of the traditional mode of running standard operating procedures to the mode of implementing the new science and technology available. Now, execution and implementation of this strategy definitely requires a careful planning by a focused team and a leadership that is familiar with the digital transformation capabilities in the market, and that can bring a sort of a unified vision of all segments of the enterprise together and prioritize them based on the business needs. We experienced in multiple occasions when we talk to the C-suite, to the leadership of the companies, they all have different sort of vision for an understanding of the digital transformation strategy for their company. So it's very, very important to have that unified sort of a process and execution and planning in place to be able to cover multiple segments of their enterprise, right? Product quality management, lean manufacturing, business continuity, workforce management. That actually it's becoming a forefront subject that a lot of manufacturers are now looking at and talking about and trying to plan for. For instance, baby boomers are retiring in an alarming rate of 10,000 a day in the United States. And they're taking their institutional and technical knowledge and experience to their retirement. And this will soon introduce a crisis, I think, into the manufacturing industry. So the millennials that are coming to the market as professionals and engineers are trained differently. They're trained based on the new science and technology and analytics. And also, they're hesitant to go work in the remote areas in a manufacturing environment. So there is a gap in between that needs to be filled using these advanced technologies. Now, utilizing such an artificial intelligence or advanced technology is a proven solution to all these problems that manufacturers are looking at. But to do that, due to the fact that the currency of this sort of a revolution, I would say, is data, the companies and enterprises also need to pay attention to building a solid data collection and management infrastructure, which includes obviously the setting up the right data producers, setting up right sensors, smart sensor, having a solid IoT infrastructure built in to be able to collect this data and also utilize this data along with the operation data, which is pretty important to be able to have that across the board. And that goes back to my first point of having a sort of a high level unified digital strategy and not work on vacuums in the different segments of the enterprise. John can touch on the importance, obviously, on the IoT side of things that you guys have been working with some of your clients and a data collection of these processes.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, that's a side of it that we for sure see as one of the main challenges for customers when they're even just trying to get started when it comes to getting their whole data world in order. Because often machine data is very siloed. Obviously, you have so many different types of equipment vendors and protocols and data format structures that are out there on the plant floor that it's a huge mess and jungle of data for customers to even think about how they can do this at scale. So companies are really looking for a way to standardize this approach to how they can easily go into or set up some sort of common data layer across all of their factories where they can easily plug into all their equipment, normalize all that data, and then have that ability to make it available to the cloud, to multiple consumers, whether it's AI platforms that can really leverage that data in a way that they're looking for. And then have that data that's able to be acted on as well, real time in an intelligent manner as well. So having something at the edge that can easily connect into all different disparate assets, normalize that data, integrate it wherever it's needed, and then optimize based on AI models that you're deploying at the edge to take action as well based on that real-time data. So for sure seeing that as a big barrier for companies to get started is really that siloed ecosystem of data that they've built out.
You actually make it sound pretty straightforward, and I would use the word easy, John. You made it seem like the process to get started could be quite simple. And I think that in reality, in the manufacturing realm, we all know that it's really not that simple. Tony, Solenis has not only internal manufacturing for their chemical products, but we service the pulp and paper industry, which is just, it's so large, so vast, so many different needs, so many different types of customers. And I think that particularly in North America, but also across Europe, I think you've got a pretty good grip from your experiences on the level of complexity that exists at our customer site. So speaking from your background, how do you think manufacturers are, what do you think their first steps are starting to be? Where do you think their challenges are? And then really the question I'm dying to hear is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted their attitudes towards investing in Industry 4.0? Because if we could all rewind 3 years and have started things that we're probably starting today 3 years ago, this whole pandemic might have looked different for the manufacturer. So can you just touch on kind of bring us back down into reality on getting started with any kind of Industry 4.0 technology?
Yeah, so I think John brings up a good point of, he laid out, hey, it's real simple, but there is a lot of complexity, and I think with that, there's a opportunity for manufacturers because that stuff's not core to their business and their focus, and this is where a good first step is find partners, find companies that are good at this, and have them help you to get started, right? You also minimize your investment risk. You're able to get started. So that's what I see as one of the things that's not happening enough. Don't be fearful. It's not part of your core business. You may not need to make it, but explore and work with some companies out there, and get partnered up and start. The first step is the first step, right?
Right.
So that's a key piece. And then with that, the second part of, how you talked about how COVID's kind of changing this, in our model where we service customers, our subject matter expertise around chemistry and our consultative approach working with our customers, that's getting challenged a little bit with COVID because we don't have the intimate access with our customers the same way. So now that's changing. How do we continue to bring that network of knowledge remotely into folks and taking these first steps of getting access securely to data, working with that? We do those things organically with people, passing spreadsheets and all that, but all that's got to start changing, right? And it's all the time with these first steps of, if you want to move quick, right, find folks that are good at this and can help you move on.
I would definitely say from my own experiences as well, getting started with connecting your data for a manufacturer, what is a realistic first step? That is exactly it. And to touch on your point, Tony, there are a lot of players in the field who can help a large manufacturer bring this center of excellence, if you will, around Industry 4.0 technologies. But we actually see that many large manufacturers have embraced the build versus buy or outsource mentality. So, anyone can answer this, but Tony, maybe you could start. Can you explain some of the pros and cons to those two approaches? Buy these analytics technologies, these Industry 4.0, or make them in-house?
Yeah, I think the kind of some of the obvious ones are, the build is just some of what I said, right? It's not a core focus yet, so you're going to have to acquire new talents and skills that aren't present in your company. There can be a little bit slower return on that investment, right? You've got to be thinking long term, right? I'm going to make this investment, add these resources, and approach it that way. So if you're willing to accept some of that longer ROI impact, right, and learnings, that may fit for you, versus some of the others that are moving a little more nimble. Let's try and move fast. They want to be more experimental, more risk-taking. So it's kind of just really, it goes back to a little what Kareem said, right? What is their strategy and what is their vision? And some of that governs that decision. But it's just kind of like how quick you're going to get to some of the ROI potential.
Right. Kareem, why don't you give us some...
Yeah, sure. Actually, I want to touch on the previous question you also asked about where to start with internally, right? So a lot of companies and that we have worked with, we very quickly learned that due to the fact that they have a broad amount of data sitting on different silos across the enterprise and not having a focus sort of objective on what this digital strategy should deliver to them ultimately and where to start. And they are running in the mode of just collecting data without having any focused sort of objective of what that data should do for them, right? If they have a business data, what data to collect. So the quality of a data. I always use this term, of course, is known to everyone, right? We are drowned in data, but starving for information. So not having the vast amount of data really truly always has a value into it. It's just the quality of that data is important. So companies are missing that point and just try to collect everything they can and trying to bring it to one spot, or sort of a collective migration of this data to a place to start getting value out of it, versus defining the value they want first and then collecting that quality data around it and then bring that up. Now, this leads us to the next question of, should they do this internally, in-house, or should they outsource this to other companies, right? The pros and cons are, based on our experience, is it's always been, even in a very large corporation, with a lot of fund that they have, and big teams as well, is lack of focus on the grander digital strategy goals, right? And these internal teams tend to start working on projects for different departments and different leaders within the organization that may not have an aligned objective, an aligned vision together. So they tend to work on, I call them science projects, and spend a lot of money on those, and not to have a sort of a solid communication and a clear plan and a roadmap toward the end goal, which would allow them to sort of run their operation in harmony among all different type of platform. A lot of them, they think that one platform would solve all the problem, and which I think is a grand mistake, because they need to be open to bring different type of capabilities, different type of platforms that well connected and communicate well to their organization for different purposes, right? So if you have a business operation management, asset management, product quality, for example, if you have a process miner, product quality prediction, they can have another platform that does asset management and maintenance prediction for them as well. Now, they usually, as they are involved in these lengthy processes within the company, they usually very seldom get to production with any product if they're done in-house. And of course, it's a very expensive proposition. But when you ask these folks, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to do this internally versus acquiring this technology from the companies that they are very focused and they know to do this the best? Their argument usually goes around, well, we don't want to share our internal process information with anyone outside, right? Which actually might be valid in certain cases, but they can find the right balance to do that and also leverage the technology. And it's a matter of privacy concern that needs to be addressed. And then also the control. A lot of companies, they want to have a full control over these processes or these implementations, and they don't want to have another team to be outside and do the work for them. But this will prove wrong, in my opinion, in a very near future, due to the fact that a lot of companies like Process Miner, like Litmus, that are focusing on a essential part of these type of science and technology will advance so far that large companies have no other choice than coming and working with us and partner with us to leverage all the work we have done, in these areas.
So pro outsource then.
Is what I'm
cases,
hearing. Yes, yeah. But of course, not every case is different, right? In some cases, of course, because think about it, you're talking about a fast pacing of Industry 4.0 advancements, right? AI, I think, is one of the speed of advancement in the AI technology in any sector, from economy, healthcare, manufacturing, and so forth, right? It's mind-boggling at this point, but due to the infrastructure we have, right? We're fortunate to have the very strong internet, infrastructure in this country, and of course, this would allow companies with focus to have a higher speed of advancement than bigger companies that may have bureaucracy limitations in their organization.
Yeah.
Right. So we've talked a lot about manufacturers who maybe haven't gone over the hump yet, haven't invested yet, what they can do to get started. What about the companies who have already made the investments and who are early adopters? I kind of want to pivot to focus on those for a little bit. And we've already talked about how people who are successful in this space have started figuring out how to gather their data, what IoT needs they have in order to make that scalable, and so on. So for companies who have been early adopters, what common mistakes have you all seen companies make? And John, maybe we can start with you, since I really do feel like the first bit of this is getting access to the data. What mistakes have you seen some of the companies who are early adopters make when working with you?
Yeah, well, I think going back to build versus buy, sometimes that's there can be many mistakes that are made there when companies are really trying to even build. So I can touch a little bit on that as well, and then some of the mistakes. But really, there are some pros to when you're trying to build something. I think it especially if you're just starting, it really does allow you to test various products, try to understand what you're looking to do, what a solution really looks like for your company. But when you're going down a path of scaling out, you really have to consider a lot of other aspects to it. So if you do either build or if you do select some sort of product, you really need to understand what that means from a manageability perspective for your company. So there's many POCs or pilots that, yes, you can either do it on your own or you can use certain products to achieve that. But when you're actually going to scale, then you need to understand what are those challenges, how this product actually scales, or how my solution I built really scales. And oftentimes I think companies overlook that. They see, okay, I made a nice POC with this one machine and I can easily scale it, but then they run into a whole other number of messes of challenges that they didn't foresee, or that technology or their solution just doesn't scale properly. So even with that, making the wrong technology investments can hurt companies quite a lot in that respect. They can lose a ton of time, a ton of money, and then a lot of politics come into play when they have to figure out how they're going to actually make a pivot from that point. So there's a lot of added time from that perspective that gets made. So I think those are some of the main challenges that we've seen in terms of companies adopting Industry 4.0, or even just getting stuck within pilot purgatory because, yeah, they have something that looks nice, it works, but there's no executive buy-in, there's no proper roadmap how they're going to roll this out. It was just more of a science project and no key objectives or problems that they were actually trying to address from the beginning. So those would be some of the main aspects that we've seen.
Great. Tony, you have something to add for that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, couldn't agree more with a lot of the stuff that John laid out. And I think one of the benefits of, you look at some of the lessons learned as you kind of navigate through this. It's one, being flexible as you kind of figure this out, because nobody has all of the answers. But just some examples, some of the things we're going through is, hey, just getting more, you talk about the pilot purgatory, producing more outputs and more information on top of already data they have isn't always the answer, right? You just get in more paralysis of things. Really kind of getting focused on specific outcomes to drive, just like John said, to drive something, right? Yeah, it could be a cool thing to do, but really move towards autonomous things in some aspects, but just getting away from paralysis and just, like I said, stay away from that pilot purgatory. You need to do it, but you need to have the discipline to be able to have a structure to get out of there.
So be more strategic about what problems you try to attack, be as specific as possible, those kinds of things.
Begin with that end in mind. It's good to experiment, and there has to be a place for that, but then you have to have that structure of, just like John said, an avenue for how are you going to take these things out of incubation and move them into the organization to scale them is a big piece.
And set the right expectation, I think, is very important also. So if you're working on these projects and any surrounding teams that have some stake in these projects have to have a right expectation also set, to make sure that they understand a lot of the advanced work that we do sometimes may require some R&D. And as you all know, scientific R&D not always produces the favorable result. And they have to be willing to pivot based on how these experiments and sometimes and this work has been done. And that's the nature of the beast. That's part of what we do. And sometimes customers, they get frustrated and they feel like that they are not making enough progress just because they have different expectation. And I think partners and even internal teams that work on these type of projects have to make sure that it is clear to the management and all the parties involved that what the expectations are and what they're going to get out of
Right.
These projects.
In fact, on that topic, we have a really good question from the audience, and it's on the point of how quickly AI is evolving and improving. What might you recommend to early adopters and who potentially need to reevaluate their systems and processes? So we've got early adopters, but they're on their path and they're at maybe a stopping point where they're saying, okay, something isn't working. What do you recommend for them, especially around needing to reevaluate their current systems and processes?
I could take that. So part of it. So as I mentioned earlier, even on early adopters, one of the areas that we have seen that has introduced problem is a lack of clear planning and understanding the ultimate goal of building these processes, right? The artificial intelligence by itself is sometimes intimidating, and it's a big name, but it doesn't need to be complicated and complex, right? They have to make these small goals, right? Have a big vision, small goals, and build toward those goals. And they have to also be very frank and open with themselves. What are the areas that they have to first improve and build a solid ground on what they want to do, build those first, and then slowly build on it. Now, these areas could apply to the infrastructure, could apply to the existing processes and people, right? After all, one of the biggest introducers of errors into any process are human beings, right? So we have to also work on the cultural aspect and educational aspect of what any of these projects are going to bring to any organization. Make sure that the people are also ready to adopt and accept these type of new technologies within their organization and processes.
Right. I actually love that you brought up the cultural piece in that, because we have another question from the audience that I think is a really thought-provoking one. And it's AI is one of the industry 4.0 technologies that really seems to hold the most promise for transforming manufacturing operations. And I think that everyone on this, all of you thought leaders have really experienced that in your careers. But it's also difficult to get stakeholders in a larger organization to understand those benefits. So do you have any advice to give on how to best get your point across in a way that is easily understandable to those stakeholders in the larger businesses?
I mean, I'll jump in with my experience from manufacturing. I mean, you know, manufacturers are smart, right? They've driven out a lot of the low-hanging fruit out of their cost for with using a variety of models, right? So to your point, Sydney, really, how do you distill what's that next level of optimization? I mean, that's really kind of what it is. How do you get at those things that, you know, it's that last 3-5%? You need different tools and you need different ways to go about it, right? So it's starting down that type of message. And with that, it kind of ties into where we ended on the last question. The culture is going to have to shift a little bit, right? You're not going to be able to address it the same way you would address, you know, a lean kind of approach if you use that. It's just going to require quicker feedback loops, experimentation, just different cultural aspects, but then also different tools, which is like where AI comes in and just looking at your data differently with more dimensions to try and get at those last percentage points.
Right. AI can be really an intimidating topic, I think, for most people. And honestly, in manufacturing especially, and I'll just speak to the pulp and paper industry, it really appears as though the true benefits of AI products have yet to be realized, and this is likely true across all manufacturing. Do you guys agree with that statement that maybe the true benefits of AI haven't really been realized yet, and maybe that's what's making it so difficult for key stakeholders to kind of get their grips on? Do you agree with that?
You know, let me rephrase this a little bit, Sydney here. So part of our technology innovators' job is to simplify our offerings, right, in such a way that not only it's not intimidating, but also it's sort of self-promoting for the consumers, right? Consumers, in this case, let's say manufacturing industry, it only cares about the benefits of the system they can use and how intuitive and effortless it is to use that system to get the benefit, right? AI is not a new thing. It's been around. Now we are at the point that we have an infrastructure to truly bring it into flourishing. But the messaging sometimes it's complicated and it's hard to understand for the consumer. And also the system that we bring in. I think I'm going to go back to what Tony said earlier. To overcome the adoption and complexity of these challenges, right? For example, we have built a first generation of autonomous manufacturing system called Autopilot in Process Miner. Why did we do that? Because we saw that the traditional manufacturing operators are having a hard time, just based on the long time experience that they have, to follow some of the instructions from a system, from a computer. So what we did, we helped them. We made the AI, artificial intelligence assistant to them. We gave them the closed loop, right, to get the recommendation and apply it directly to the machine and work on the high value optimization challenges that require precision monitoring and adjustment in a real time. And this would give them the value very clearly without them really trying to get to the weeds of how this AI works and how I need to learn about the prediction only, right? So it is an adjustment around that. And I think partially the problem has been that we could not clearly show the value because there were a lot of dependency on the operators or people involved also. And we can't do that. We cannot put more on them. We have to actually take off their load and help them, right? And to realize these values. And the more sort of autonomous and closed loop and automation system comes in, the better it gets. Now, I think John is definitely seeing this firsthand on the IoT side of things, that how companies are seeing the value of having this two-way communication to their systems, and then realizing the value of these transactions of the intelligence coming from the platforms like Process Miner into their processes.
Yeah, for sure. No, definitely see that as a big next step or advantage that companies are trying to move forward. So I think even going back to the previous question or points around how AI is really offering all this promise, but I think companies really need to have some sort of proper mindset and not just go into it and say, I'm going to do AI. It's really about what this roadmap looks like for me. So really starting with collecting the data, starting to look at some of this data, then starting to optimize it in a tool that can actually leverage that data and AI platform, and then optimizing everything where you're actually taking decisions then on real time. So closing that loop, and not everything is going to be done at day one. It's really a journey that these customers are going to embark on. So you can't just say, I want closed loop AI from day one, or I want to do AI. It's really about embarking on this journey and taking it as a step-by-step approach. And I think that will really help stakeholders understand where they can see these specific benefits at each level, what they're achieving until they're fully autonomous or have a fully AI autonomous process or manufacturing plant that's running.
Yeah, completely agree, John. And, we've got a couple of questions in the audience about risk. And I think this is a good lead in, because you've mentioned that you can't just hop on and say, yep, sign me up for AI. I want all of my data in the cloud, and I want autonomous control of this part of my process. It doesn't really work that way. And along the road to getting started with AI, the adoption of it really does bring about some risk. Can you highlight some of the risks that you've seen regarding the adoption of these Industry 4.0 technologies?
Is that to me? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. You
Yeah.
or anyone, if there's any specific risk someone wants to bring up, it's a question from the audience.
Sure. I can highlight a few. So I think data integrity or data quality is definitely is a risk, as I think somebody previously mentioned. So having the right kind of data that you're using, the right kind of structure of data, so you're not just putting a whole jumble of data into a database and sorting through it from that point. So having that right quality is always a risk. If you don't have the right data pipeline essentially set up, then it becomes extremely challenging to even embark on an AI project. Security is always a large risk, obviously. So having the right, when these kind of companies are exposing now data to the cloud, that's still sort of a new phenomenon for these companies, as they're usually, manufacturing is usually meant to keep everything within the four walls. So making sure you have a secure pipeline that you're actually able to stream this data to the cloud, and that your data is stored securely, or your processes or recipes are stored securely within those environments. But then when you've actually created these models, being able to actually efficiently run these things at the edge inside of the four walls of the factory. So you're not exposing any sort of closed loop control from the cloud. That's a big no-no in manufacturing. Obviously, you don't want to expose, you can expose one way the data pipe, but you don't want to be exposing control back to assets from the cloud, because there can be a number of security risks from that point. So figuring out how you can really optimize everything within the four walls at the edge, where you have an intelligent platform that's taking decisions on these on the data as it's coming through. So I'd say those are some of the risks that we tend to see.
Sure. And just a quick note here, you and Kareem have both mentioned the a little bit of what I would think are buzzwords, like edge, for example. Can you explain to maybe folks who are attending this webinar who aren't as familiar with the lingo, what you mean when you say edge?
Yeah, so edge or edge computing is really about processing data close to the source, usually running on the local network close to the assets. So you obviously have cloud computing, which is infinite amount of cloud resources, where it's running usually off premises somewhere, where edge is really running locally at that site. And it has the ability to take, it's not only collecting the data and pushing it further, but it also has the ability to process data, analyze data, take intelligence decisions. You're obviously limited by the amount of compute power since it's running locally, whereas you have infinite amount in the cloud. So generally, edge is more about local processing, local decision-making, and local analysis of data close to the
Great,
source.
thank you. I think that's a great differentiation that I just want to make sure was clear. You know, Tony, I think that some risk beyond the technology side of things, what are the risks on the manufacturing side of things when adopting these Industry 4.0 technologies?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the key thing, like people running manufacturing plants, their job is to mitigate risk, right? They're all about, making widgets, right? Whether it's a paper mill or a, glass factory, whatever it is, right? They're trying to optimize and mitigate downtime, all of these things. The way I look at how do you overcome, that's the risk, the impact of the plant, taking those, those next steps, is really breaking your use cases down to very simple success, small places to start, right? Because success will breed success. So you want to go after areas, pilots that are less risky, right? You kind of have to bake it in there. You need, frequent feedback cycles to kind of get things started, right? But it's truly, that's how I see it and see folks trying to de-risk it, because when you think of, just like we laid out, hey, the autonomous factory that's just running itself, right? That's a big dream. How do you get there? Well, you got to break down to what's the simplest thing. And, I always go back to, how did we get to, APC controllers, advanced predictive controllers? Just those are pretty complex. we didn't get there overnight. We did a bunch of small little PI and D loops to get there, and people had to get comfortable with those. It's the same methodology. You just kind of have to apply it to this new tool of AI. So we kind of know, manufacturers kind of know how to adopt new technology. They do it all the time. They just need to kind of think about it in the same mindset. For my
Right.
man.
Yeah, I agree, Tony. So again, think big, start small, right? The AI technology is not disruptive technology, so it's easily implementable to the existing environment without really disturbing anything else, because you can have a very safeguard limits around it and make sure that you can start with the baby steps per se, and start realizing the values in there, and of course work toward the main goal of bringing the full power of any AI technology, which again requires building the infrastructure around it. So the fact that you can start implementing and building infrastructure easily, it's a huge advantage for manufacturers, because they just don't need to think about an end-to-end process in the beginning. They can start with the smaller process improvements and build on from there. Tony, I think we are experiencing this with our mutual clients right now, and you might be able to touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, continuing with the risk concept, is we're a chemical company, right? We wanted to stay within our wheelhouse, right? We're not going to go in and go run somebody's plant, right? We want to continue to use AI to leverage our offering to our customers. So a lot of our use cases now are centric around chemistry and their impacts on the process, right? So it's starting small and staying in that kind of space to get success stories.
Makes sense. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think we have this leads into another really good question from the audience. And I'm going to reword it just a little bit because it kind of touches on one of my favorite phrases. And I work a good bit with both Tony and Kareem, so they've heard me say this before. But what does good look like? So when you're starting to investigate a new product, a new process, maybe you're creating a new paper grade on your asset, whatever it is, you got to have some kind of idea of what good looks like. So from the perspective of a manufacturer who's just getting started with Industry 4.0, in fact, they said they're a little late to the party, but better late than never. I love that. They would like to know what advice we can give for those who have already been through the process successfully. So, and I know we've talked a lot about what does make a successful implementation. We've talked about culture, but in short, what does good look like for the manufacturer who is adopting AI and doing it successfully?
To me, in short, if we have ease of pain that manufacturer already have using the technology with least amount of investment and resources, that is good, right? Because you want to have a clear understanding of what pain point the client have, the manufacturer have, and the value of that, and how we can minimize that value and overall help the operation. I think, and this could be, this could apply to, for instance, energy consumption, right? If they are running high on energy, if they want to, if they have a sustainability goal that they have to achieve, if they have a production quality problem, right, yield, and these are the different areas that manufacturers for years, right, have been dealing with, and they all sum up in, we call it, in a variability reduction, right? In our business, the goal is to reduce variability in different stage and levels of their operations, and that brings a lot of good to the manufacturers, because these reductions stage to stage will impact positively moving forward within their process.
Okay, so well articulated and quantifiable goals, if you will, that is separating the what good looks like for a successful adopter versus maybe one that's struggling a bit more. John, do you have anything to add on what good looks like for the successful adopter?
Yeah, I think Industry 4.0 is obviously another big buzzword, and it's it doesn't, I wouldn't necessarily say it means the same to everyone. Just because somebody's doing industry 4.0 doesn't mean you have to be doing the exact same thing they're doing. There's a number of different use cases within that can be applicable to your business, either big or small. So either if it's starting small with just kind of getting data and visualizing it, so now you have some sort of real time input of data where you can now see more specifically what's affecting or what's happening with a specific process or a specific type of machine. Or it can mean you're doing AI driven predictive maintenance. So it doesn't mean you have to be at kind of those are kind of the opposite spectrums. But I think it's really about starting small, understanding, as Kareem mentioned, what the exact problems you're trying to address with industry 4.0, rather than trying to make it a very large thing from day one. Is really something that's important, and finding the right partners or the right technologies that have had success or can show you various examples or use cases that can really accelerate your digital transformation.
Great. So well articulated, quantifiable goals, starting small but thinking big. I think a couple of other things that I'll just add in from my own experience with successful adopters. A forward-thinking culture, company-wide. So from the operations floor all the way through senior leadership. These are the companies who I've worked with that not only are they early adopters, but they're successful and they're quickly successful. Rapid adoption is the words I would use. If your company is forward-thinking, and you have the ability to bring that culture down all the way from the top to the operations floor and back up. Those are the most successful companies I've worked with. So not only culture, but also a group of people who are willing and able to learn, willing and able to be educated, just like we all had to learn to rely on GPS on our phone. We all have to learn to rely on these new technologies in manufacturing. So someone who is open to learn, who's not set in their ways. These are the people, so physically boots on the ground, who are making the most impact with whatever AI technology they're trying to implement, and doing it successfully. And those all sound like really great things if you don't have that in your organization, but it does exist. It does exist in the pulp and paper industry. It does exist in other manufacturing industries, these companies whose cultures are aligned from top down, and it's amazing to work with them. I think we all should strive for our companies to reflect more of a culture that is willing to adopt AI from top down. And honestly, that leads really well into what I think might be one of the last questions, unless there are any remaining from the audience. But we've talked a lot about what is and what has, and I really want to talk about what will be. So as we look into the deep investments that people are making in manufacturing artificial intelligence right now, what are your guys' predictions in terms of what manufacturing might look like 5 years from now?
I personally think that considering what happens right now on pandemic, right? It is more evident than ever that robotics, touchless systems, industrial IoT, and also autonomous control will be a big push in the next few years. And I think based on the fact that we're going to have a lot of baby boomers out of the manufacturing industry, these become more necessity. And I think autonomous control, along with all the other areas that would support that, will be the near future.
With that, I would just add in, we're going to see more, not that human interaction is going to just dwindle totally away, but more exchange of information remotely, right? And just different avenues, right? Email was a big thing. People started emailing reports and all that stuff, but I just think the deep technical knowledge harvesting out of this data, more virtual centers of excellence to kind of tap into, like what knowledge companies have and how can they bring that very quickly to a manufacturer, right? Versus having to fly somebody on a plane. How do you bridge those gaps is going to be a big piece.
Yeah, I think obviously the holy grail, what a lot of manufacturers are after is lights out manufacturing. So whether that's going to happen for some in 5 years or 10 years or potentially 15 years or longer, I think some will be achieving that within the next 5 years, where they're having a fully autonomous factory where they have data, they have access to data from anywhere. They're able to take decisions on that data autonomously, so that the actual process or the whole manufacturing process or machines are taking their own decisions based on data, where there's little human intervention in between, and everything can be controlled either remotely or autonomously. I think that's what the holy grail is. Some might be there in 5 years, some might take longer, or maybe might not ever get there, but I think that's somewhere that companies should be striving for the next 5 to 10 years.
That's the path we're on. Great answers. Everyone, this comes to the end of our webinar here. It's been an hour. We really appreciate all of your time and thoughtful questions. There are a few questions that we didn't get to from attendees. Please know that we'll reach out to you with our answers. And again, just want to thank the panelists as well for spending the time to answer these really thought-provoking questions. Everyone who's joined and stuck it out to the end, thank you. We really appreciate it. And everyone have a very safe day.
Thank you. Thank you, Sydney. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Sydney. Thanks, everyone.